Hello everyone, it's Ryan again with Dark Winter Moon, and today I wanted to talk to you about shadow work. What is shadow work? Well, simply it is the process of working inward into yourself. The idea is that we all have a deep, rich, subconscious, internal being, internal world that for the most part we are not consciously aware of. And the idea is that that inner world has a tremendous effect on our outer world, our outer life. It's one of the reasons we say, as within, so without. So, this inner world, I've heard it likened to an iceberg. So, all of our conscious thought, all of our conscious awareness is the tip of that iceberg that's above the water, and everything else, the subconscious, is beneath. So the subconscious is vast. And in my life, I grew up in a very Christian church, a very Christian household, and I was always taught from an earliest age to deny those darker impulses, to take anything that wasn't considered acceptable by that Christian faith and shove it down and push it away. And as a result, in my later life, in my adult life, I have had to do a lot of work to exhume and pull out those parts of myself. And sometimes I feel like that the work has just begun. It's hard. And yet it's also a very liberating and gratifying process. Witchcraft takes an entirely different approach. We do not think that these subconscious things, this subconscious realm, is evil. It is dark, yes. It's in the shadow. One reason we say that is because it's hidden. That's why we call it shadow work. And the process of exploring that inner world is the process of uncovering that shadow and accepting that deep self and coming back into union with it. And so those abandoned, dark, evil parts of ourselves, we don't really see them that way in witchcraft. We see them as opportunities. We see them as, I kind of like to look at them as kind of children that have been neglected in some ways. And the process of shadow work is learning to love those parts and accept them. One of the things that I've been working through lately in that regard is Existential Kink by Dr. Carolyn Elliott. And she's a witch and a hermeticist, and she talks about the process, her process for going in and retrieving some of these shadow pieces. It's very interesting. I won't go into it a whole lot, but I'll summarize by saying she starts with the quote from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And even with just only being about halfway through this book and this practice, I've noticed that that in many ways that's true, that there are parts of my being that are screaming out to be heard. There are parts of my shadow that really all they want is to be acknowledged and to allow the emotions that they want to express to be felt in my body. And this practice, the Existential Kink, is about giving voice to those parts of us that we've never allowed to speak. It's been very liberating. A really great example of what Elliot talks about in my life in this process is I have for a very long time struggled with working in like a corporate environment, whether it's retail or it's a bank or whatever it is. I've always struggled with that, and I've always kind of repeated this same cycle where I get burned out from that experience. And so I did shadow work on that, asking myself why I keep repeating this pattern. And I looked at my last job. I was always having confrontations with my last boss, and it was a very emotionally manipulative experience on her part. And I realized that on some level, I really got off on that. I liked the confrontation with her. I liked being able to confront her and to try to win with her, and also liked the feeling of being righteous in that situation, of being the one that hadn't done anything wrong. And I was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. But I had that something like that is normally considered shameful, so I had pushed it down into my shadow and never admitted to myself that that was true. And once I did admit to myself that I enjoyed those confrontations, and not only that, that in fact I had chosen to be in them with her, it released that emotion. I was finally allowed myself to experience that I enjoyed that confrontation with her, and it released it. So that's but one example of what I'm talking about. And shadow work in general is just like that. In witchcraft, we use many tools, and have many tools available to ourselves to facilitate the shadow work. We have ritual, we have magic and spells, we have dream work, we have divination. All of these give us clues that allow us to find those parts of ourselves that we have hidden from ourselves and exhume them. One of my favorite examples of a tool is dream work. So as you start to do shadow work, you'll probably start dreaming. And these types of dreams dealing with shadow work tend to be very vivid and clear. And when you have a dream like that, you'll notice the difference. It seems to have a different texture than other dreams. And for me, at least, they're very metaphorical. I had a dream the other night after doing some really intense shadow work that I had been shaving the skin off my hand with a microplaner, like a mini cheese grater. And in order to soften my hands, that was the whole point in the dream, at least in dream logic. And I was like, oh wow, that's really working. So I peeled back a layer, and I'm like, oh, that's working. Oh wait, there's more. Peel back another layer, and I got down to this really nice sort of tender pink flesh. I was like, oh wow, this exfoliation is really working. And I looked again at my hand, and there was a little spot there that I had probably dug a little too deeply with the microplane. I was like, oh wow, that's okay. Well, maybe I should stop this process. And then I looked again, and it had started bleeding profusely. And so I held my thumb over it like this and was running to the sink to try to wash it off, and blood was spurting out everywhere over the sides. And I started to panic. I'm like, that's a lot of blood. I'm going to bleed out. And then I woke up. And then looking back at that dream and trying to frame it in a shadow work way, I realized that it was a metaphor for the work that I was doing, that I had been peeling back layers that were in the way of me finding a piece of my shadow. And very visceral, very bloody, maybe disgusting to some people experience, was my subconscious in my dreams trying to tell me that the work that I was doing was having an impact, that I was getting to something that was tender and uncomfortable, and to pay attention. And that made me realize that I was on the right track. And I think that's something that's also important to understand about shadow work, is that it is often uncomfortable and scary. And I think that's why in some contexts and in some religions that it's that when people come to that point where they're confronted with their shadow, their tendency is to turn around and run away because they think it's evil or scary. And it is scary, but part of the way that witchcraft looks at it is that, oh yeah, it's scary, then let's go deeper. And that is very important to recognize, that just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad or wrong, that it's usually an indication to push forward and move into that feeling, and to seek it out. I think too, one of the best things for me in shadow work is journaling, and about my experiences. Talking to myself about them helps me solidify and understand my experiences. I've also had a lot of great experiences, or a lot of really effective shadow experiences in ritual, especially with a group or coven that I trust. There is something about the ritual space that puts your mind in yourself into the perspective of dealing with your shadow. I consider ritual space and ritual work as priming and getting you ready for that. It's a shift of mindset. It's a shift of state of mind. And I've had some really intense, sometimes scary, sometimes incredibly emotional experiences, and seen others go through that in ritual. And what I will say about that is again, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad or evil. Just because it's scary is more of an indication in shadow work that you're on the right track to push through it. Because in some ways, our conscious mind does not want us to uncover the shadow, because doing so disrupts the worldview and the self-image we have as ego. And if we're able to acknowledge that and step past ego and allow these things to come to us, these intense experiences, then we will gain knowledge and wisdom, and we will grow. And also, having the partnership of a deity or guide to help you through your shadow work is very helpful as well. I have had experiences where there was work that I won't say that I couldn't do on my own, but not only would I have been unable to get to easily or quickly, but it was hidden from me in a way that having a deity to help me find it and release it was very, very helpful. Not to go into a whole lot of details, but Apollo, my patron deity, bless his wisdom, helped me locate something that was, for lack of a better word, written on my soul from a past life. And I had no idea it was having an effect on me. It was almost like a chain around my soul that in ritual, he was able to go into me and help me release, to pull it away from my soul and to dissolve it. And it was a very freeing experience. So shadow work is something that's usually, or can be, really intense. And in witchcraft, however, we have a lot of tools that are available to us in order to facilitate our work in our shadow. Divination is another tool. The tarot, the runes, there are many other forms of divination that can help us uncover our work this out, to work in the shadow. And as I said, as within, so without, when you start to do this shadow work, when you start to move these things out of your way internally, you'll see a result in the outer world. You'll see shifts in those around you and the circumstances around you. Another thing that's really been on my mind lately are the implications of shadow work as a collective experience. So what I mean by that is I look around at all the shifting and changing that's going on in the world. And as a kind of soul and thought experiment, I've been asking myself, so in what way have we collectively, as the human race, chosen these things. For instance, COVID-19, the Black Lives Matter protest movement, to name a few. Why have we chosen such an intense experience for ourselves collectively? And again, as within, so without, if it can be said that each of us individually harbor a shadow side, then collectively humanity does as well. And so I think that the wisdom in that is that not only first, are we choosing this on some level? So if we're able to ask ourselves, why are we choosing this? Then I think it helps us to uncover some things that we can do in order to help make a difference. So why do we choose COVID-19 collectively? And I've talked to a few folks about this as well, about my feelings about this. But if I'm honest with myself, I felt entrapped by the world and the world that we as a human race had built. I was working so much and not feeling like I was getting anywhere. I felt like not only myself, but so many others of us felt like we were on the hamster wheel, just going around and around and around, and that there was nothing that we could do to stop it. I felt trapped in that. And I think a lot of people did. I think as a human race, we felt that. And so we manifested COVID-19 to wake us up. And I know that may be kind of a harsh way of looking at things. And I also want to say that that doesn't mean that I do not feel deeply for anyone that is suffering because of this. But change comes when we're forced to face our demons. And COVID-19 is one of our demons rearing its head. And it gives us a choice. We can try to force the world back into how it was before with all of its problems and issues, or we can take all of the things that COVID-19 has made available to us, that it has made visible to us from our own collective shadow, and we can start to work to shift the world and change it for the better. Same thing goes with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it sucks. People have to die sometimes before change happens, and that is so terrible. And what's been going on lately with Black Lives Matter has forced the issue. It's made it so visible that we can no longer ignore the issues that we've had around race in this country, in the US. And now we can do something about it. Now we can no longer ignore it. And already the overall public opinion has shifted in the favor of the protesters just in a matter of weeks. And that's phenomenal. So as a shadow work practice, I think there is wisdom and effort or change that can come out of, good change that can come out of looking at COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, the other things that are going on in the world now, and take them as opportunities to do better. And with that said, an example of this that I've been doing is going back to the pattern that I had around work. I've been trying to break that down. Right now I'm technically unemployed, so I've been using all of this free time to not only start building a business around what I really want to do, which is creating sigils, doing magic, helping people with magic and divination, but also doing shadow work on the habits and patterns that kept me for so long in the cycle of working for other people and for things I didn't really care about. On a more meta level, on a more humanitarian level, I've been trying to think of ways that I can help with things that are going on in the world. One of those is making small donations to things that help with the Black Lives Matter movement, like the bail fund, and also doing things that help support our frontline people that are in the fight against COVID-19 and taking care of the rest of us. I've been trying to do what I can If I do order out, or order in, as it were, then I'll try to support local restaurants because I know they're struggling. There's little things that we can all do. I'm also currently working on a project that will allow me to offer a sigil that 100% of the sales will go back into a Black Lives Matter charity or related charity. I haven't finalized my decision on which charity that's going to be, but I will have more information on that soon. My point is, though, that the world is giving us a lot of information. The shadow is giving us all a lot of information right now. And it is all consummate on each of us, not only to pay attention to the meta collective messages from the shadow, but also to work inward on ourselves, to get our own shadow integrated so that we can be more effective in the world and that we can be more whole and powerful people. I hope that this video was helpful. It was helpful for me. It was helpful for me to kind of talk it out, what's kind of been going on inside of me lately. And I would appreciate anyone that has any questions, DM me. You can find me on Instagram, dark.winter.moon. I would love comments below. We can talk about it in any way that you're comfortable with. Please reach out. I would love to continue this conversation. As always, I would also appreciate likes and subscribes, ringing the bell. That's what keeps me going and makes me want to do more of these videos, and also improves my online presence, which is what I'm working on right now. Thank you all so much, and as always, take care and blessed be.